I'm pregnant.
The sun always seemed kinder to Adaeze in those days. Every morning, the golden rays slipped through her bedroom curtains like gentle fingers, waking her softly before the alarm ever dared to ring. Her small one-bedroom apartment in Enugu glowed with a peace that could only belong to someone who truly loved her life. She would hum softly as she ironed her neat skirts, pressing the pleats just right, and then pack her bag with the same care she gave to everything around her. The streets outside were already alive, the call of the Accra woman, the impatient honk of Kiki riders, the laughter of children running late for school. But inside Adaeze's world, everything moved with grace. She was 28, beautiful in a quiet way, the kind of beauty that drew attention not because it screamed for it, but because it carried itself with dignity. At Vertex Construction Limited, she had built a reputation as the reliable secretary, calm, efficient, unshakably polite. The men admired her, the women respected her, and her boss, Mr. Kenechukwu, trusted her more than anyone else in the building. At least, that's what she believed. She handled his calls, typed his reports, and managed his chaotic schedule. When he traveled, he left his laptop with her. When he was angry, she was the one who soothed his temper. Sometimes, their hands brushed when she passed him a document, just a second too long, just enough for her heart to stutter. But she told herself it was nothing. After all, he was her boss and a married man. Yet life has a way of twisting even the cleanest intentions. The connection between Adaeze and Kenechukwu didn't happen like in movies. There was no candlelight, no planned seduction. It began with exhaustion. One late evening, after everyone else had gone home, a storm broke out. Rain hammered the roof, and lightning flashed like angry spirits outside. Kenechukwu was pacing the office, his shirt half unbuttoned, face tense with the stress of an unfinished government contract. Adaeze offered to help, as always. They worked together in silence, their words swallowed by the thunder outside. When the lights flickered and finally went out, there was a pause, one of those long, heavy silences that seemed to breathe on their own. He sighed, rubbing his forehead, and whispered, "I don't even know who to trust anymore." She said softly, "You can trust me, sir." Those 5 words changed everything. He looked up at her with eyes that held too many stories of ambition, fear, and something dangerously close to loneliness. That night, she drove home with trembling hands. The rain had stopped, but inside her, a different kind of storm had begun. Days turned into weeks, and boundaries blurred. Kenechukwa's once formal compliments became tender. Lunches became dinners. And before long, dinners turned into nights neither of them could speak about in the morning. It wasn't planned. It wasn't wise. But it felt, for a fleeting season, like love. Adaeze carried her secret carefully, the way one might cradle glass in both hands. At first, when she missed her period, she panicked. She took the test 3 times, hoping the lines would disappear. They didn't. The next day, when she finally told him, Kenechukwu sat in silence for a long time. Then he took her hand. "Don't worry," he said gently. "We'll handle this. Just don't tell anyone. My wife must never know." His voice was calm, but his eyes darted nervously, as if he were already calculating the risk. He promised to take care of her, to rent a bigger apartment, to make sure she wanted for nothing. Adaeze believed him, she wanted to believe him. She even smiled when he suggested she should take some time off work, later in the pregnancy, so no one would suspect. But promises, like morning dew, fade with the sun. 2 months later, Kenechukwu began to withdraw. He stopped visiting her apartment. His messages grew shorter, his tone colder. When she came to work one morning, she found out she'd been transferred to a remote branch for company restructuring. She confronted him that evening, her heart breaking with every word. "What's going on?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this to me?" He didn't look at her when he spoke. "It's for the best, Adaeze. You know I have a family. Let's just end this quietly." Quietly, as if her growing belly could ever be quiet. As if the heartbeat inside her was not screaming with life. The next week, she received a letter of termination. Those were the last golden days of Adaeze's peace. After she left Vertex, the world suddenly felt louder, crueler. Friends stopped calling. The man who had promised her everything wouldn't even meet her eyes when they crossed paths in town. Alone and scared, Adaeze moved to a new area, a humble neighborhood on the outskirts, where nobody knew her name. She began to hide beneath loose gowns, avoiding mirrors that might reveal her secret. The months crawled by like slow rain on iron roofs. At night, she would sit by her window, one hand on her stomach, whispering to her unborn child. "You will be great," she'd say, "even if no one believes in us." Sometimes she dreamt of her old office, the sound of clicking keyboards, the laughter in the hallway, the smell of Kennechuckwa's cologne. She missed it all, but she told herself she was free. And yet, every freedom came with a price. When the labor pains came one stormy evening, the same kind of storm that had started it all, she was alone. No one to drive her to the hospital, no hand to hold. The cries that filled her tiny room that night were not just her baby's first, but also the sound of a woman breaking and being reborn in the same moment. When she finally held her son, small and warm against her chest, tears blurred her eyes. She named him Chimdima, "My God is good," because even in pain, she refused to believe life was cruel. But deep inside, she knew. Her secret was only sleeping. One day, it would wake. The news of Adaeze's dismissal spread through the company corridors like wind over dry leaves. No one said anything to her face, but whispers floated behind her as she cleared her desk. Some pitied her. Others smirked with that cruel curiosity people reserve for stories they don't understand. She walked out of Vertex Construction with a cardboard box pressed against her chest, a few pens, a framed photo of her department team, and a fading ID card that still bore her smile. The sky that afternoon was cloudless, painfully bright, the kind of day when the world feels too loud for grief. Adaeze didn't cry. She only felt a strange emptiness, as if her heart had quietly packed its own bags and left her body. That evening, she called Kennechuckwa again, once, twice, 3 times. Each time, his phone rang and then went dead. Finally, a text arrived. "Please don't call me again. It's over. Take care of yourself." For a long while, Adaeze stared at those words, unable to move. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. She sat on her bed until darkness swallowed her. That night, she dreamed of being chased, faceless people shouting, papers flying, her belly heavy and slowing her down. When she woke, sweat drenched her back. It wasn't just a dream. It was her life, unfolding like a warning. Days bled into weeks. The rent was due. Her savings shrank faster than she could count. She had thought pregnancy would make her glow, but instead, it made her invisible. Employers turned her away politely once they noticed her rounding figure. Even the landlady's once friendly smile became tight with suspicion. "You're not married, right?" the woman asked one morning, eyes sharp as glass. "This is a decent compound, oh. We don't want stories that touch." Adaeze murmured something about her husband working abroad, but the lie tasted bitter. By the 7th month, she could no longer hide. One afternoon, as she returned from a fruit stall, a group of neighborhood women stopped talking when she passed. She felt their eyes burn into her back. One whispered, "These girls of nowadays," and laughter followed. It stung more than she expected. That night, Adaeze packed her few clothes into a gonna-must-go bag. She looked around the small room that had once felt safe, the same place she had dreamed of raising her child, and realized she couldn't stay. The next morning, before the sun rose, she slipped out quietly. No goodbyes, no forwarding address, only a silent prayer, "Lord, let me find peace somewhere else." She found it briefly in Nsukka, a small university town miles away. The rent was cheaper there, and anonymity came easily. She rented a single room at the back of a long, cracked building painted in fading blue. The walls were thin. She could hear the neighbor's radio and the crying of babies at night. But no one knew her story, and that was enough. Every morning, she woke before dawn to sell zobo and buns by the roadside. The money was small, but she managed. As her belly grew, she moved slower, but her spirit remained firm. Sometimes she would pause in the middle of the street, watching students hurry past, and whisper to her unborn child, "You will go to school one day too. You'll wear your bag proudly." People called her fine woman, never suspecting the quiet storm she carried inside. Yet the loneliness crept in like evening fog. On Sundays, she sat at the back of church, eyes closed, pretending not to see the families around her. She missed laughter, missed being seen. The world had turned its face away, and she was learning how to live with that darkness, to walk through it without letting it swallow her whole. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled across the hills, Adaeze sat on her narrow bed, writing in a small notebook. She listed baby names, crossed them out, and wrote new ones. Then suddenly, a sharp pain gripped her lower belly. She gasped, clutching the edge of the mattress. The pain came again, stronger. Her breath quickened. The clock ticked, steady and cruel. She realized the baby was coming too soon. Rain battered the roof, drowning her cries. There was no one to call, no neighbor close enough to hear. The small kerosene lamp flickered, throwing shadows across her face as she bent forward, trembling. Minutes turned to hours, pain into exhaustion, until at last a cry broke through the storm, thin but alive. She stared at the tiny boy in her arms, his skin glistening, his fingers curled around her own. She laughed and sobbed at once, whispering, "You made it, my son." Outside, the storm began to fade, leaving behind the smell of wet earth. She named him Chimdima, my God is good, and wrapped him in a faded shawl. Yet even in that sacred moment, as she rocked him to sleep, a quiet dread lingered in her chest. She had hidden her secret from the world, but she could feel it. The truth was not buried. It was only waiting for the day it would rise and demand to be heard. Morning light crept through the torn curtains of Adaeze's new room like a hesitant visitor. The sound of vendors calling out roasted corn and akara mixed with the cries of her baby, tiny but insistent. She had learned to wake before him, to boil water on her small charcoal stove, and to count the remaining cups of gari in her tin before heading out. Chimdima was barely 4 months old, but already he was her compass. Every plan she made began and ended with him. The town was not kind to mothers without rings on their fingers. When she carried him to the roadside to sell her buns, strangers offered advice she hadn't asked for. "You're too fine to suffer like this. You should go and beg his father." But Adaeze only smiled faintly and kept frying. Oil splattered on her hands, but she didn't flinch. Each golden round of dough was a prayer, each sale a small victory against the silence that had swallowed her former life. At night she would hum old hymns to her son, whispering stories about courage, about how lions never announce themselves, they simply rise. The months rolled into years, and the struggle thickened like the dust on her windowsill. When the rent increased, she took up washing clothes for students in the university hostels. The cold water stung her fingers until they cracked, but she washed on, singing softly to keep her heart steady. Chimdima grew quickly, curious eyes, laughter like bells, always asking questions his mother couldn't always answer. "Mummy, where is my daddy?" he asked one afternoon while she mended a torn shirt. The needle paused in her hand. She looked at him and said, "He's far away, my son. But one day, you'll understand that family isn't only who gives you life, it's who fights to keep you alive." He nodded slowly, the kind of acceptance only a child can offer, and ran outside to play. That evening, Adaeze watched him chase paper kites in the dusty street, and her chest tightened with both pride and fear. She was raising a child in a world that had already judged them, yet his laughter made the judgment fade. Still, the city's hunger was endless. There were weeks when the customers were few, when she skipped meals so her son could eat. One Harmattan season, she fell ill with fever, but dragged herself to the roadside anyway. If she didn't work, they didn't eat. On one such morning, a man in a faded construction uniform stopped by her stand. He bought a bun, tasted it, and smiled. "You make this yourself?" he asked. She nodded. "You're good. You ever think of supplying offices? People at sites need things like this." His words sparked a small light in her. That night, she sat up counting coins, daring to dream again. Within weeks, she began delivering food to small construction sites, balancing trays and baby on her back. The men called her Madam Courage, and for the first time in years, Adaeze laughed freely. The streets still tested her, but now she moved through them with quiet purpose. Every sunrise was another chance to prove that what was broken could still build. But fate has its own timing. Chimdima was 6 when the cough began, dry at first, then deep and frightening. The clinic doctor shook his head, murmuring about an operation that would cost more than Adaeze had earned in years. For the first time since she left Enugu, fear pinned her to the floor. She watched her son sleep, his small chest rising and falling, and she knew hiding was no longer an option. Somewhere out there was a man who had promised to take care of everything. Somewhere was the company that had thrown her out. The secret she had buried was stirring again, demanding air. The next morning, she packed a small bag, tucked her sleeping child in her arms, and boarded a bus to the city she had sworn never to see again. As the vehicle rumbled down the highway, Adaeze looked out the window, the wind tearing at her scarf, and whispered, "Whatever it takes, my child will live." She didn't know that the storm waiting for her in Enugu would be far greater than the one she had left behind. The first sight of Enugu after 7 long years felt both familiar and foreign. The hills still stood tall, the air still carried the scent of red dust and diesel fumes, but the city no longer felt like home. Adaeze stepped off the bus with her son in her arms. The same streets where she once walked in heels now echoing beneath her worn slippers. Her heart pounded, not from the journey, but from the weight of what she was about to do. She had promised herself she would never beg that man for anything again. But a mother's heart does not keep promises when her child's life is at stake. She stopped by a pharmacy to buy paracetamol, just to ease the fever, and then took a slow walk toward the glass-fronted building she had once called her office. Kenechukwu Construction Group was written in bold blue letters on the signboard, shiny and unbothered by the pain it had caused. Inside those walls were the ghosts of her past, the desk where she first met him, the files she once typed, the smile that ruined everything. When she stepped into the reception, heads turned. Not because anyone recognized her, but because she looked out of place, dust-streaked, weary, holding a boy who clung tightly to her neck. The young receptionist asked, "Madam, do you have an appointment?" Her voice was polite but distant. "Please," Adaeze said softly, "tell Mr. Kenechukwu that Adaeze is here. He will know me." The name made the receptionist hesitate. She picked up the phone. Minutes later, 2 security men appeared. "Madam, Oga says he's not available," one said, already gesturing toward the door. Adeeze's knees weakened. "Please," she begged, "tell him it's about his son." The words hung in the air like thunder. The guard blinked, unsure what to do next. The receptionist froze. And then, through the tinted glass of the upper floor, Kenechukwu appeared. For a moment, their eyes met. He looked older, heavier, fear flickering behind his eyes. But he turned away. "Oga said you should leave immediately," one guard muttered, now firmer. Adeeze didn't argue. She walked out slowly, tears mixing with sweat, her son's weak voice whispering, "Mummy, are we going home?" She nodded, though she didn't know where home was anymore. That night, they slept in a bus terminal. She gave him her wrapper for warmth and whispered, "God will not forget us." In that quiet, something inside her shifted. The woman who once hid her pregnancy was done hiding. She would speak, no matter the cost. The next morning, she went to a journalist who had once interviewed her old boss years ago. The man listened quietly as Adaeze told her story, no exaggeration, no bitterness, just truth. He asked for proof, and she showed him everything she still had. The old employment letter, the transfer notice, the text messages she had kept as evidence of the promises he made and broke. The journalist's expression hardened. "Madam," he said slowly, "do you know what you're doing? This could destroy him." Adaeze looked at her sleeping child and said, "Then let it." Within a week, the story hit the airwaves. YEC staff accuses construction tycoon of pregnancy cover-up and unfair dismissal. It trended faster than anyone expected. Other women began to speak out. Investors started to ask questions. Government auditors visited his office. Kenechukwu's empire, built on polished lies, began to shake. But life isn't a movie where villains fall overnight. The backlash was brutal for Adaeze too. People whispered that she was lying for attention. Old colleagues called her shameless. Yet through it all, she stood firm. Donations began to pour in from strangers who believed her. A women's foundation offered to pay for Chimdima's surgery. The operation was risky, but it was successful. For the first time in years, Adaeze slept without fear. She rented a small apartment in town, started a catering business with help from a church group, and watched her son regain his laughter. Each sunrise now tasted like redemption. Months later, she passed by the same office again. This time, the gate was half open, the company logo removed. Rumor had it that Kenechukwu had been arrested for fraud, his properties seized. His wife had left with their children. Adaeze stood by the gate for a long moment, the same spot where she once begged and whispered, "God fights for those who cannot fight for themselves." Then she smiled, not in revenge, but in peace. Trouble had exposed her secret, but truth had given her wings. And as she walked away, the sun broke through the clouds, warm and golden, falling on her like grace. Time has a way of turning pain into power. 3 years after the scandal, Adeeze's life looked nothing like the quiet suffering she once knew. The small catering business that began with borrowed pots had grown into a thriving company known across Enugu, Chima's Delights. Her jollof rice and meat pies were being served at corporate events, weddings, and government functions. Newspapers that once called her the ex-secretary who cried foul now called her the woman who rose from the dust. She had become an inspiration to many, especially young single mothers who once thought their lives were over. Her son, Chimdima, was now 9, lively and brilliant beyond his years. "Mummy," he'd often say, "when I grow up, I'll build you a house bigger than the one that man owns." And Adaeze would smile softly. "My son, don't build it from anger. Build it from peace. Let success speak for us." She didn't talk much about the past anymore. She didn't need to. Every order, every smile from a satisfied client, every moment of laughter in their small home was proof that her tears had not been wasted. Yet, the past has a strange way of echoing back when the world least expects it. One evening, Adaeze received an invitation to cater a major event, a government summit on ethics and transparency. She accepted without thinking much of it, until she saw the guest list. Sitting among the attendees was a familiar name, Kenechukwu Okafor. Once the powerful CEO who strutted through air-conditioned offices, now listed as former businessman, currently under review. When she arrived at the venue, wearing a simple but elegant white gown and a head tie that framed her calm face, she caught sight of him from across the hall. The man who once made her tremble now sat hunched thinner, his eyes sunken and uncertain. Some whispered that he had lost everything, his company gone, his wife divorced him, his children studying abroad with no contact. The scandal that began with Adaeze had uncovered more corruption than anyone had imagined. He had spent months in detention, fighting court cases, watching friends abandon him one by one. When he saw her, their eyes met for the first time in years. He looked away first. Later that day, as the event ended, a quiet moment drew them together. Kenechukwu approached her slowly, hat in hand, his voice rough. "Adaeze," he began, barely above a whisper. "I came to say, I'm sorry. For everything. I lost everything I thought mattered. I see now that the secret I buried destroyed me." His eyes glistened, not from pride, but from exhaustion. For a moment, Adaeze just stared at him. The room around them faded. The years of pain, the humiliation, the lonely nights, all pressed at the edge of her memory, but so did the image of her son smiling, alive and safe. "I forgave you long ago," she said softly, "but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. I hope you find peace." She turned to leave, but then paused. "And one more thing," she said, looking over her shoulder. "Truth doesn't destroy people. Lies do." With that, she walked away, her footsteps steady, her head high. News of Kenechukwu's final downfall came a few months later. The government repossessed his remaining assets. He was declared bankrupt. Meanwhile, Chima's Delights was featured in The Guardian Nigeria as one of the top female-led businesses to watch. Adaeze bought a small plot of land on the city's edge and began building the home her son had always dreamed about, not a mansion, but a house filled with laughter. On the day they moved in, she stood by the window, watching the evening sun dip behind the hills, its glow washing everything gold. "Mama," Chimdima said, tugging her dress, "we made it, didn't we?" She smiled. "Yes, my son. We made it, not because life was kind, but because God was faithful." And as she pulled him close, the wind carried her laughter through the quiet street. The laughter of a woman who once hid her pregnancy, but could no longer hide her victory. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains of Adaeze's new home, painting the walls in hues of gold. The sound of laughter drifted from the kitchen. Chimdima, now 10, was trying to flip pancakes like he had seen on YouTube, and failing miserably. "Mummy," he called, his giggles echoing through the small but beautiful house. Adaeze smiled as she walked in, her wrapper loosely tied, the air filled with warmth. It had been months since she'd felt this kind of peace. No longer looking over her shoulder, no longer fighting shadows of her past. Her catering business had grown beyond Enugu, expanding into neighboring states. She'd begun mentoring young women, teaching them not just how to cook, but how to rebuild their lives. Every weekend, she held free training classes under a mango tree near the market, a place where stories were shared, tears were wiped, and hope was reborn. To them, she was no longer the woman with a secret. She had become Mama Courage. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived, sealed with the emblem of the Federal Commission on Business Ethics. It was an invitation to receive an award for integrity, courage, and exemplary conduct. Adaeze stared at the paper for a long time, tears gathering silently. The same country that once ignored her cries was now calling her a symbol of honesty. The award ceremony was held in Abuja, broadcast nationwide. When her name was called, the hall erupted in applause. Adaeze walked to the stage wearing a simple cream-colored dress, her steps steady, her heart calm. She looked into the crowd, journalists, government officials, even some of her old colleagues. Somewhere in that audience, she saw a familiar face, Kenechukwu, sitting quietly at the back, his head bowed. For a moment, their eyes met again. No hatred, no pride, just an unspoken understanding that life had balanced its scales. "This award," she said into the microphone, "isn't just for me. It's for every woman who has ever been silenced, for every mother who has ever had to choose between shame and survival. The truth may sleep, but it never dies. One day it wakes, and when it does, it restores everything you thought you lost. When she finished speaking, the applause filled the hall like a wave. That night, social media buzzed with her story once more. Old videos resurfaced, hashtags trended. Hashtag Adaeze the Strong, hashtag Truth Restores. Her name, once whispered in gossip, now stood for courage. Brands reached out for partnerships, NGOs requested her presence at events, and even the local news station ran a documentary titled From Secret to Strength. Through it all, Adaeze remained humble. She built a foundation in her son's name to support women and children in crisis. Each time she looked at Chimdima, healthy, bright, and full of dreams, she remembered the nights she had slept hungry just to keep him alive. She knew now that pain, when endured with purpose, could become the seed of greatness. Months later, Adaeze took a quiet trip back to her village. The same village that once whispered about her shame now came out to greet her like a returning queen. Old women ululated, children danced, and the town chief presented her with a plaque. To our daughter, who turned disgrace into grace. She knelt, tears in her eyes, her heart heavy with gratitude. That evening, she sat under the Udala tree where she used to cry years ago, listening to the crickets and watching the stars. God, she whispered, you turned my hiding into shining. You made my secret my strength. The wind blew softly like an answer. In that stillness, Adaeze finally knew her story was complete, not because she had defeated anyone, but because she had defeated shame itself. And so, the woman who once hid her pregnancy became a living lesson to the world. That no truth stays buried forever. That suffering is not the end of the road, but a bridge to something divine. Her life became a folktale of modern times, told not by griots with drums, but by millions online who saw themselves in her courage. The final line of her story was written not in newspapers or awards, but in the quiet voice of her son, who hugged her one night and said, "Mummy, you are my hero." She smiled through her tears and whispered back, "No, my son, we are the story.